Hey guys, I'm Ich and welcome to part 2 of my behind the scenes coverage of a professional shoot. In part 1 we covered mainly the lighting side of things, which was by far the most complicated part of the entire shoot. Hence why I made it a separate video and also why I needed help from Andrew, who was the lighting technician aka the gaffer on that particular shoot. So before we go any further, if you haven't watched part 1 yet, stop, go watch it and then come back. I'll still be here, I promise.
Much later.
Now, in this video, I'm going to cover things like the camera and the camera movements that we went with. I'm also going to cover all the pre-production work that goes into a shoot like this one. And finally, I'm going to cover my role as a director and all the things I have to manage on a shoot of this size. Obviously, this is a professional shoot with a reasonable budget, so if you're a very green videographer, you might think that this is not for you. But keep in mind that even if you only use 1 or 2 things that I mentioned here today in your own productions, that will improve your videos massively. For a shoot like this one, before we even start filming, there's a lot of work to be done. First, I need to write a shot list, a gear list, and I also need to put together a team, which in this case is a very small team. There's only 3 of us because there's not that many moving parts. It's not an overly complicated shoot per se, and also because I decided to spend most of the money on the lighting and on an extra day for setup and testing. So once this is all done and locked in, I've got my team, my equipment, I know exactly what we're going to film on the day. All that's left to do before the actual shoot is to set up our lights, make sure it all looks the way we want it to, and then test every single shot on our shot list. It's a bit expensive to do this on a separate day because obviously I have to pay everyone twice, and also if I'm renting any gear then I gotta pay double for that too. But with such a complex lighting setup, it's important to make sure that everything is just right so that all that money and effort is not ruined by a couple of mistakes that we didn't have time to pick up on. For example, when we originally set up the RGB lights in the background to fill some of the dead space behind the player, we thought all we needed was just a few red and white lights and that would be enough and be good to go. And as we were almost wrapping up for the day, we were just finishing our camera tests, we realized that, these lights didn't really mean much and they were just taking attention away, and it was a bit of a waste really. And Dave, I think, was the one who came up with the idea of turning these lights into wickets. For my American and Canadian friends, the wickets are those little sticks behind the batter that the pitcher or baller is trying to hit. So by changing the design from a generic thing to now a very cricket related thing, something that every cricket fan can automatically recognize, it made so much more sense. It looked so much better. And this is something that if we would have done that on the day, we never would have had time to 1, pick up on this, and 2, actually implement it and test it out. So this is when an extra day just to set up and test and make sure you're happy with everything makes all the sense in the world. Because once the players arrive, you can't waste time doing things like that while they're sitting around just waiting for you. Anyway, that was basically our setup day, so now let's move on to our actual shoot. Let's start with the camera. Luckily I had Dave there with me on the day, who was shooting with a Sony a7 III, which was set up on a Ronin S gimbal. And first of all, on a shoot like this, where I'm constantly giving the subject directions, asking them for certain emotions, certain movements, making sure they hit their mark, having someone there to handle the camera, which allows me to completely focus on my role as a director, makes a huge difference. Because if you try to do everything yourself, something is definitely going to suffer from it. you're either not going to give enough direction to the players, who are not actors by the way, so they definitely need it, or you'll make crucial technical mistakes with the camera simply because you weren't paying enough attention. So yeah, having someone handling the camera that I know I can trust to do a good job makes a huge difference. So the reason we used the Sony a7 III for that particular shoot is because it ticked all the boxes for us that day. One, it's the perfect size to work well with a gimbal like the Ronin S. Two, the image is quite sharp and there's a lot of flexibility with the picture profiles. And three, it records at 100 or 120 frames per second in 1080p, which allowed us to do those great super slow-mo shots in full HD. But really the main reason why we use this camera is because it's Dave's camera, and sometimes there's just no need to overcomplicate these things. If you have a camera that can do what you need, why would you waste money and time on a camera that will overcomplicate your workflow for a very similar result at the end of the day? When it comes to the camera and player movements, that's where a proper shot list makes all the difference in the world. Because it's not as simple as just picking 5 to 10 action shots that I'll get every player to do on the day. There's actually a few more things to consider before putting together a shot list. First off, I always make sure I know exactly how much time I'll have in total with the players. And spoiler alert, more often than not, you won't have as much time as you need. Which is why it's extremely important to at least know what time frame you're working with. Then I write down all the different shots I want to do, but I break them up into 3 categories. The mandatory shots, the gravy shots, and the money shots. By the way, these names are names that I came up with and are in no way, shape or form industry standards, but they're pretty straightforward, so that's why I like them. The mandatory shots are the very basic ones that I need every player to do. From the guy who might get a game if he's lucky, to the biggest superstar on the team. I need at least one consistent shot across the board that I can then use for the starting lineup announcement, for example. So in this shoot, we went with a simple arm crossing motion. The gravy shots are a bit more creative, they add more variety to my content, but they still don't take too much time to shoot or to prep. Typically these shots are specific to the position of the player I'm filming, so in this case they are batting related for batters and ball related for the bowlers. And lastly, my money shots are very specific to either the personality of the player or a moment in my video that I really want to make the most of. For example, we did this Hulk celebration thing with Kane Richardson because that's his signature move during games. We also got a couple of star players to swing their bats at the camera because I knew that this could be very useful on a big beat drop in my soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, once I'm done writing all my different shots and putting them in the right category, now it's time to create one shot list per player.
What did you say?
Yes, you heard me right. One shot list per player. It doesn't take that long because there's a lot of copy paste involved, but it is absolutely necessary if you want to make the most of the time you have. Because what you don't want to do, as hurtful as it may sound, is waste valuable time on fringe players who might get a game or two if they're lucky. With players like that, I allocate 5 minutes, which gives me enough time to do 1 or 2 mandatory shots and maybe a couple more gravy shots. This means that I now have more time to spend with established players. With these guys, I tend to spend 10-15 minutes and do a lot more gravy shots. And then with my last category of players, the superstars, we're talking 3 to 5 guys, the ones that are on the posters, that get the biggest reactions from the crowd. With these guys, I try to spend at least 15 to 20 minutes and get them to do everything. Mandatory, gravy, and of course, money shots. Because they're the stars of the show and they should be the stars of the videos as well. As I said before, allocating a specific amount of time to each player based on the total amount of time that I have with the entire team is a must. So if I had an extra person on set, I would make it that person's job to let me know every time I'm about to reach the time limit with a player, but in this particular case I had to do it myself, which was okay, but not ideal. Another thing that people don't often think about is to make sure that the set is fun and relaxing for the players. Again, they're athletes, not actors. So coming into a room full of professional lights and cameras with 3 strangers telling them where to look, what to do, and what to say can be quite intimidating. And if they are shy, nervous, or in a bad mood, that will most likely be visible in the footage. So I have a few ways around that. I always have music playing in the background so there's no awkward silence and the atmosphere is a bit more laid back. Also, I make sure I don't take myself too seriously because I find people have a tendency to mirror the vibe that I give out. So if I act nervous and stressed, that's how they'll be as well. But if I'm easygoing and truly seem to be enjoying myself, there's a good chance that the players will let their guard down and actually enjoy their time on the set. Also, when I ask them to do or say something on camera, I usually start by doing it myself just to show them that it's not that hard and there's nothing to it. After the shoot is done, we obviously pack down everything, but from a footage perspective, I strongly recommend you make 2 separate copies of everything you filmed that day. There's a lot of time, effort, money, and resources that went into this footage, so losing it is not an option. Also, when it comes to editing, don't fall into the trap of overusing this content in your hype reels, because this type of content should be used as exclamation points, just once in a while to really bring your point home.
Do you really think we need the exclamation point? Because it's not top of the muffin to you!
Personally, I use this type of content, maybe a little bit more the intro to set the mood, but after that, it's just after highlights here and there to replace celebration shots.
Have some of that. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, what a good catch.
Alright, so on that note, if you haven't already, I strongly suggest that you watch part 1 of this video, which was entirely dedicated to the lighting of this shoot. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed those 2 videos because it was a bit different than what I usually do in my sport videography tutorials. So yeah, if you did, make sure you let me know in the comments. And even if you didn't, don't just put a thumbs down. Actually, leave me a comment as well. Let me know what you didn't like because that's the only way I know how to get better. Anyway, once again, my name is E, and I truly hope I earned the privilege of your time.